Yeah, I think we good. Live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Work in Progress podcast. For the last 23 episode, you saw me do this podcast together with Wes Botman, my dear friend and associate. He's not here. He's suspended. No, he's not. But we figured it would be cool for 2026 to bring in some external guests. Because we, after talking about the repeat diet and other repetitive stuff for 23 episodes, we thought it was good to switch it up and learn from some other people and pick their brains and listen to their journeys. So, with that being said, I'm very happy that our first guest is actually Eric Simone. He's a Silicon Valley veteran. He's an IoT legend, if I may say so. And he had a first-hand experience of some interesting things, I must say, that we're going to talk about. First and foremost, the early days of Silicon Valley. He founded multiple companies. He sold some. He did some soul searching in between, and currently he serves as the founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO of ClearBlade, which is an Austin-based IoT and Edge AI company that we at Noco also had the pleasure of working for and with recently. So that's great. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ian. Great to be here.
Nice. You got the ClearBlade hat on, as I expected, because
Yeah.
you truly live the brand, which is what we love. Um, there's so many
And
things.
and and it's because I haven't had a haircut in like 8 weeks. So yeah, I
Okay.
need to have it.
Well, it looks fine on you, and I'm still waiting for mine, to be honest. But I guess that still needs
Oh,
to come.
we get they're highly coveted. So my teenagers steal all my hats and shirts. So
Got
the
you.
local high school is a big fan of what Clearblade does.
Hey man, that's free advertising, so sounds good to
Yeah.
me. Okay, Eric. I mean, I can't wait to ask you this, and this is why I'm also gonna start off with this right away. So I was born in '85, so I grew up in the '90s, and I'm one of these guys who has strong nostalgic feelings for everything that's '90s, the aesthetics, the perfect mix between analog and digital. There was some sort of innocence, you still had to call someone to meet up like 2 weeks later, and then that person would actually show up because that's what you agreed on in the call. There's so many things I can. The shopping malls, the computer games, the consoles. It's just
Yep.
for me, it's pure magic. And then nostalgia is also something that can hold you back when you dabble in it for too long. But today, I'm gonna indulge myself because you
Great.
came through the ranks, if that's the right expression, of early
Yeah.
Silicon Valley days. How magical was that time? How romanticized was it? Maybe now looking back on it, and what made you end up what made you end up there? How did you start there? Shoot,
Okay.
go.
So yeah, it was magical. San Francisco in the 90s was just a great place to be as an entrepreneur. How I landed there was I was working for IBM in Chicago, which is where I am here. Like I go back and forth to Austin, and I had switched my job from being a developer, right? So I'm a computer science nerd that did a bunch of programming for IBM, air traffic control, and then I did a short stint at Johns Hopkins Hospital and built their patient identification system. And what rejoined IBM in sales, which to me was really a new experience without any sales training. I didn't go through the normal IBM process, so I ended up doing tech sales around Chicago and having a great deal of success selling. At the time, visual programming was all the rage and client server, right? So I was if people remember this, I was a small talk specialist and object oriented programming specialist, and IBM had some tools called Visual Age that I was an expert on, and part of my journey was as I went and sold to companies like State Farm and Allstate and Walgreens and Sears in Chicago, I was frustrated at the lack of support that these customers were receiving on the product. There were really no lab services at the time, or real guidance, like framework guidance on how to use the product. And I had learned certain way of doing things on the traffic for air on the air traffic control project, and I had been repeating that for customers all around Chicago and at Kodak in Rochester, Minnesota. And IBM created a product out of it, and they made a bunch of money. And then I went back to my normal sales job, and and then something happened along the way of being young and making too much money at the time, or at least what was appeared. Maybe I didn't attend all the calls I was supposed to, but I was basically in '94. IBM decided that hey, my commission was good enough by the time we hit June, and said we're going to change your plan, and that frustrated me at the time. And so I ended up talking with a couple of friends at IBM that I worked with really closely, and said, look, I want to go start a business to do this. Actually, to be honest, I want to start a business. I wanted to build software first. So I wanted to do fantasy football and NCAA tournament software.
Was that a
And
personal
my
passion of
partners,
yours, football?
oh yeah, yeah. Big sports. I'm a big sports guy. When I did my demos at IBM, in fact, I would tailor it to the season. So during the NCAA tournament in March, I would put the bracket up using the IBM software. I would click on the different boxes, and it would show the synopsis of the game that's about to be played and who they think would win, that sort of thing. And so that was a really fun demo to give. One of the reasons I think we sold a lot was I tried to make things exciting. And I did the same with football. And then that's what I wanted to build. And my partners, being more reasonable and than I was, said, hey, look, there's lots of issues with trying to do this back then. How do we do credit card processing, right? This is 1994. The internet's not even really going yet. It's just starting. So they said, why don't we do a services company for these IBM products? I said, that's a great idea. So the name Compete that was the name of the first company, Compete Incorporated. And Compete was all about, winning and all about sports. So that was kind of why the name was that. And it ended up being a good name for any company. And how I ended up in San Francisco was I knew I had trained some people on my methodology within IBM. And like I said, they built a practice out of it, and they were doing projects around the country. And there were two projects, one in Omaha at a company called ConAgra, and one in San Francisco at The Gap, who most people know. That's a retail jeans company based in San Francisco. So I was talking to both teams, and they said, we want you to come on to help. And I said, great, but I'm not going to do it as an IBM employee. I want to do it as Compete. And they both said, no, we can transfer you to the IBM consulting division, and you can do that. And I said, yeah, that's not what I want to do. And then after a few months, the folks at The Gap, in fact, they were IBM folks. Yeah, they said, we'll do it. So I quit IBM on a Friday in October, 94. I think it was October 28th, maybe, and subcontracted back to IBM on that Monday after driving to San Francisco. So that's what landed me in San Francisco, because the first project was there.
Right. And you must have met quite some interesting people there, because it was a completely new industry.
Yeah.
The internet, was built, the internet wasn't really even mainstream yet, maybe.
Nope. Yep.
So can you name a few companies that you came across like in the early days that we now
Sure.
all know or got to know as the years
Sure.
passed? Yeah.
So, well, one, I'll mention some of my best friends today are from that era. They're investors in ClearBlade, which is wonderful. So
Nice.
I met a bunch of friends there. I would go down to Palo Alto a lot because there was a favorite sports bar called the Old Pro that we knew the owner. So we would go set up the games on Sunday morning for football. Big fantasy football. I started the fantasy football league that I'm still in '97 out there. But those friends are lifelong friends. I chat with them every day. But that time in San Francisco with companies like Adobe was really taking off. Macromedia. I had a girlfriend that worked at Macromedia, which I think got acquired by Adobe. So Netscape, I knew employee 4 at Netscape. One of my friends was dating her. And it was just everywhere you went, people were talking about technology and The internet was brand new. I remember I showed my friends, a couple of them, their first internet experience, right? And say, hey, look at this. You can go into Mozilla, you go into Gopher and go and do these things. And look, they've got these pages. And I was reading Wired every day, right? You'd
Right.
go pick up, before it's digital, right? You go pick up the Wired magazine
Oh
and
yeah.
read about all the new tech. It was, at 27, 28, it was magic to me. So, and on top of that, like all these companies were throwing, huge get-togethers, parties, free drinks, right? Recruiting. And so, it was a really fun time because it just felt like everywhere you went was technology and startups. In fact, just I used to joke, when I started Compete, people didn't call it a startup; they just called it crazy. They, like, people at IBM. They said, "What are you going to do? You've got a great career here. Why would you leave and do this? You're insane." And I said, "Yeah, but if I don't do this now, I don't want to look back 5 years later and say I should have." And boy, what a mistake that would have been.
Did you always sort of innately have that entrepreneurial spirit there that you wanted to be independent, or is that something that grew as you went through the IBM ranks?
Grew as I went through the IBM ranks because I went through university in the 80s where computer science was kind of a new degree. I went to Purdue, and again, this is back when you go to a building in the basement and you had these dedicated VT100 terminals. I'm aging myself, but you already did that by saying you were born in 85. So I was born in 66. But at least they had the punch card machines pushed in the corner. So we didn't use punch cards, but it was the old terminals. And so when I worked at IBM, I used terminals to do this stuff. And I remember I had all just one color terminal, and then the big deal was to upgrade to the four color terminal, and then the big deal later was you got a IBM XT or AT PC, and you had a mouse, and then you could do things like cut and paste with a mouse on a green screen, which was fabulous because you could avoid all sorts of repetitive stuff. And then we eventually built scripts to automate. I mean, it was just magical. I love learning new things, but I didn't have like this idea I was going to start a business. It was never really a thought. I just wanted new experiences. I just wanted to keep learning.
Yep.
And so that's why I spent 2 years at IBM, and I quit and went to Johns Hopkins for a year. And then I rejoined IBM back in Chicago. I was in Maryland at the time. Then I rejoined IBM back in Chicago, did 3 years of tech sales. And then, yes, frustration. Again, IBM, a great company to start with, a great company to learn with. I don't want to disparage IBM and all. It's just big companies, right?
Yeah, it's a corporate, right?
Work,
Mm.
yeah, they work differently. And I remember when I graduated school, I had this vision. Oh my gosh, I got 3 offers from IBM. I'm going to take the one in Maryland near DC because that's the most exciting spot. And this air traffic control project was fascinating. But some things started frustrating me. One, even in my early job, I'm like, the corporate world wasn't as buttoned up, or as it was buttoned up, but it wasn't as well organized like I thought. I think you all have this impression in school that you go to big business and it's, man, you're now in the major leagues. And I saw so many things that weren't what I expected. And one thing I failed to do was actively promote myself. It's one thing that I'm never have been really great at. I just always thought, do your work, make sure that it's excellent work, and then you'll get noticed. It's not the way it works. And
Well,
so
internal
yeah,
politics, for a career in
uh,
corporate, that plays a big role
yeah,
too, right? And if you wear your heart on the sleeve and you're not the most like politically correct
yes.
person or the most diplomatic person, then that doesn't necessarily work to your advantage. It's what I,
Yes, that was me. And, I would wear suspenders and, colorful shirts. And that was kind of frowned upon. And I was a programmer, right?
yeah,
And I remember one manager told me once, hey, I would put in my hours, and they would say, well, you're not staying late or coming early and doing this. And I said, well, but look at my output. It's going to be as good or better than anybody else's. And I was pretty good at it. And so I'm like, I also value my free time. And I had lots of young friends that worked at IBM, and we'd go out, all the time. So it was it was an interesting journey. And then I always wanted to learn more. And one of the frustrating things on that air traffic control project is for 2 years, I busted my butt coding. And yes, I would stay late when we had deadlines and we needed to meet them. And I'd come in early and do all that stuff. And none of that code ever saw the light of day because the project ran into delays. And then, I think they ended up scrapping the whole thing. At the time, it was IBM's largest project they had ever won. It was called the FAA AAS project to rebuild the nation's air traffic control system. But after 2 years of just grinding on a team of like 600 people, it was massive. And all that work went nowhere. And that frustrated me. So I liked my time at Johns Hopkins because that was different. I got to build their patient intake system back in the day, and I got to do it all by myself.
Okay.
And that was very, very satisfying. And then they had me train people at roughly my age then on how to use the product and how to put a system into production that ran well.
IBM in the 90s, so we're talking mid 90s here, right? It was already a behemoth, but what was sort of I can imagine that also was the era where IBM was really going from analog to more digital, right? Or maybe already
Yep.
well on its way. So what as a business and sort of the areas where they made most of their revenue, what did IBM look like during that era?
Well,
Was it
IBM
computers
was
already?
transforming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, IBM was transforming itself from a mainframe hardware business to a software and services business, right? Still mainframe drove most of the revenue. All my projects were on mainframe systems, right?
Yeah.
And it was funny, while I was in the IBM cocoon, you know, things were happening like Microsoft and Apple that I was just not in tune with, right? I was unaware. I mean, I was a big PC kid. If you can see the Apple II
Yeah.
behind me, that was what I had in high school. And I was the kid that always, had all the games and wrote the computer programs. And we had a computer science center in my high school that had a DEC PDP-11. So that's where my love of computing came from. And my neighbor was an executive for Wang Computer. So I got to use the terminal in his house that was tied to the Wang system. So I was a complete total nerd that loved building, the typical adventure games where you select your action, you come up on the altar, do you grab the sword, stuff like that. And then everyone in the school would play it, right? So IBM was transitioning into software. And that's why I was frustrated, because it's like, if you're going to sell software, in fact, I wrote a business plan about this. Like, I got thrown into a branch office that was all sales. And I had, like I said earlier, I had zero sales training, but I knew how to build. And I went to my manager. I said, look, we can't sell this software with foils. And I don't know if you know what foils are,
Oh.
but they're clear pieces of paper, basically, that you would then run through the copy machine or printer machine. Actually, it was a copy machine that would take your prints that you put in a program and build slides, and you'd show them on an overhead projector. And so that's what people were doing to sell software.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can't sell software this way. You got to show it. So I wrote a business plan to buy a PC. It was a portable computer. It had an orange screen. I could probably show an image of it if I had one up. And then it had a case with wheels. So that was like a $10,000 piece of equipment.
That's how
And
you
so I
did your
had to
sales
write.
pitches?
Yeah. So what I did, I had the branch manager, Michelle Collins, great person. She would always kind of, everyone in the sales office would see me with this computer, and all day I'm like programming my product that I put on the IBM bulletin board system. And that's how they knew about it.
Right.
And then they productized it. But they were like, they'd come over and go, what are you doing? I'm like, programming. And so I had this computer, and I worked with the IBM lab in Raleigh that had a special card that you would stick into it that would emulate the mainframe operating system. And at the time, it was a VM operating system, and I could run everything on that machine. And to me, that was insanely magical, right? This thing was, it was kind of a lab experiment. It wasn't a product IBM had released yet. So I was like one of the first guinea pigs for that product.
Wow.
And I was able to I build my demos on that. And I think the demo that I used for my system was a video game cataloging system for my various Sega Genesis and the Sega system and Apple and so forth. And so I could look up all the cartridges. I could say, it would give me the description. It was just fun to do. And that's what I used to demo with. And what I would do is I'd bring the computer, and they had another piece of equipment that would plug into the computer and sit on the overhead projector and project the image, right? So lots of different technologies here to work. I laugh because look, I get on these podcasts and I got to get my Bluetooth headphones to work. This was way more complex than that. Um, and I would demo, right? And then as the client server movement got going, that's when I kind of got into, well, wow, now we're going to start using the power on the PC to do all the graphical stuff, get away from green screen and still communicate with the mainframe. Client server was all the rage in the early 90s. So IBM was transitioning from hardware to software to some degree, but also IBM was really not in a good place. If you remember, there were hiring freezes in the early 90s. One of the reasons I had trouble getting back in, I was on a term employment contract, which they extended. And, and, IBM they were talking about disbanding, different divisions of IBM and breaking it up. The CEO at the time, John Akers was the CEO. And then IBM brought in Lou Gerstner, right, who just recently passed away. And he was an excellent CEO because Lou Gerstner got in and said, look, let's focus on the customer. Let's focus on sales. Let's grow our services division. And let's work remote. So IBM was one of the first companies to go remote work. So, fast forward to 94, I worked out of my Chicago apartment with a laptop, an IBM ThinkPad, and you went through training on how to do this. And the training included, hey, even if you're not visiting any customers that day, get up, put your suit on, put your tie on, and sit at your laptop. They give you all these rules.
That's awesome.
And
That's pretty cool.
that's how it was. And to me, I used that time with my two friends. One was an incredible salesperson, and the other was an incredible database person. And back then you had to sell not just the software, but you had to sell the operating system. So you had to sell OS2 because IBM was not buying into Windows at the time. It was the OS2 versus Microsoft war. So you had to win an OS2 argument and then sell your software on top of it. And you also had the database DB2 stuff, right? Either local DB2 or on the mainframe DB2, usually both. And so we banded together as a team, and all three of us went and sold to these accounts. So I didn't do it all by myself. And thank goodness we had our roles because I was an expert in negotiating the software price and all the nuances there. I was the tech guy, right? So tech sales. And the three of us pooled our commissions and split it three ways, which was we just decided to do that and got approval to do that. And it was in 94 where IBM kind of said, okay, enough of this game. We're going to unwind that. And you guys are going to go your own way.
Eric, can we zoom in on the working from home in 94 a little bit?
Sure.
Because how did that even work?
Uh, well, I'll give the story's kind of great. In fact, my roommate at the time, who was also my college roommate in my fraternity house, works here at ClearBlade. So he can go back to those days when I was in the apartment doing the work. But it worked well for me because I was always building and tinkering. So it wasn't just sales, right? I was building my demos. I was talking to my partners. So I had kind of a community of folks that I worked with. We'd meet for lunch downtown Chicago. We'd go drive to State Farm in Bloomington. We'd drive to Caterpillar. We would go. One thing I loved about Chicago too is in the city, we could be downtown you had a home office too, where you had shared desk space downtown in Chicago at the what used to be the IBM building. And then we could walk to, 10 customers a day and go visit with them. And
Sure.
so
No,
we were always,
yeah. Sorry, no, for sales, I understand, right? And, doing outbound calls, but a lot of phone calls probably. But did you already have like some sort of internet line then at home or something for data
oh yeah,
transfer? How did that,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, we have to keep in
Oh,
mind, so the younger listeners who have literally no clue at all that this was even a thing.
oh yeah. Yes. So it was a combination of you had, so we had token ring connectivity remotely, if I remember right. I could be wrong I'm trying to think how we did it. And a lot of it was replication. That was the big thing. You wouldn't have access. It wasn't fast enough to do all this stuff from your home. So you'd go in the office, you'd plug in your laptop into the token ring network, and then all of your emails would send, and then you download all your stuff. So you still had to kind of dock in. Yeah, I forgot about all that pain. And back then too, whenever I had to install a new operating system, it took me like half a day because I had 28 disks that I had to go through and update the system. So yeah, it was a process. I forgot about all the pain that came with that. Um, but working from home, was mainly for us working out in the field. We were
Yeah.
always planning our presentations and sitting around figuring out how to go get the next deal. And we were killing it in Chicago selling these new products because we had a really well-oiled machine as a 3-person team.
Right.
And as we had more and more success, that's when I recognized these customers now were having trouble using the software because they didn't have enough support, they didn't have enough guidance. And so I would actually do a lot of extra sales work that was staying behind with the customer, helping them get their first system up and running. So kind of basically implementation services without charging the customer.
Right.
And that's when I got frustrated because I'd bring it up to management and say, look, we got to build this, but that's a much bigger thing. And so I'll give you the full story. What happened was I got my commission cut. I think it was June. And I basically told my manager, I wasn't shy. Again, not politically correct. I would, my manager was up in Iowa too. So I'm talking to some guy in Iowa that I barely ever met. And he would say, why weren't you on this call and this call? I said, well, it's because I was out visiting customers. And he would kind of get on me. And I'd said, look, if my numbers aren't good, then fire me. But if not, leave me alone because I'm doing what I think IBM wants me to do. He sent me a book on communication, which I never read. I probably should have. So, I was a stubborn guy. But I just knew I was doing the right thing for the company, and that's all I really cared about. And then when they cut the commission that first month, I mean, I was really close to Wrigley Field in Chicago. And so I would go to Cubs games and drink beer. And, for a month, I just kind of was, kind of lost. And I'm like, I can't, after a month of that, I'm like, I can't continue this up. This is not the life I want to lead. It was fun, but I'd be a bleacher bum for the rest of my life, which may not have been bad. When the Cubs got good, it would have taken a couple decades. And so what happened then was I just made a decision that I'm going to leave and start a company. And
Right.
a couple things I did, and IBM can't fire me now, so I can talk about it. So one of the things I did was break a rule, which is you're not allowed to, make income from doing something else, right?
Right.
But one of my customers was Loyola University of Chicago, and they had bought the software on our sales pitch. And I basically knew they were struggling. So I said, hey, if you folks want help, I'll do it for, whatever it was per hour. And I made like $10,000 over a couple months, right? And then I used that money to buy my first Pentium processor machine, right? My first, I think it was a Gateway, if I remember right. And that started my journey. So okay, I had the computer, I had a plan, or at least the semblance of a plan.
What
And
was the
then I,
plan? What
I
was the
got up.
plan, Eric? Like,
Well, the plan was to start, once we had talked a few times, to start a company to support IBM software, right? That's
right,
Compete.
the consultancy
And
business,
so,
basically.
yeah. And one night, I mean, this is just the way I got up at like 3 or 3:30 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. This was in my head, right? And I got on my laptop and I sent what is called profs, an internal email message to my
Yeah.
friend Bob and Sam. And basically, I still have that. For some reason, I printed it out, saved it, digitized it. But it was I call it my Compete manifesto, where it says a lot of stuff. I'm up at 3 a.m. and I was a colorful writer. The war of my Pentium processor, blah blah. But there was one line in it that said, like, and I mentioned it earlier. I don't want to look back 5 years from now and say we should have. I should have. So let's do this. I was really trying to convince my other two partners who were older, had families, right? One had a family, the other was engaged and was starting a family. I was single, hopelessly single in Chicago, so I didn't have anything's tying me down. And I'm like, I'll go first. I'll be the guy to go start it and get the first project. You guys come later. And then I said, we're going to be equal partners, a third, a third, a third on a handshake. Wouldn't recommend that now, but that's what we did then, right? So I left, went to San Francisco at the first client was the Gap. And then 6 months later, my friend Bob came out and I found him a project. I forget how I found him this project up in at Prudential up in Iowa, doing some database stuff because he was a database expert. He was brilliant, is brilliant. Bob Anderson. And then we built the company to about 12 people in San Francisco. And then the third partner, very successful salesperson at IBM, they did not want to lose him. This is a funny story too. And so I remember having a meeting up in St. Louis. He was in Chicago, but his manager was in St. Louis. And they brought me into his manager's office and he made me a proposal. He says, look, I know you and Sam are talking about him coming and joining your company to be the CEO. Because at the time I was struggling. We had 12 people. I was the CEO at the time and I was working a project. I'm like, how are we going to keep all these people busy while I'm on project? We need Sam to come in. And his manager basically tried to negotiate, hey, look, you can have Sam every Friday, but he stays at IBM. And that way you have a free blah, blah. And I basically looked at him. I said, I don't need a 1 day a week CEO. I need a full-time CEO. And so Sam had a tough decision to make because he was making really good money and he had a family. And then there was just 1 day in San Francisco, which is probably one of the best days of my life because one, we had a company dinner in San Francisco at my favorite restaurant, Ideale. By the way, where I got engaged and where I had my wedding dinner and all sorts of stuff. But and you'll find out why. And we had that meeting, and Sam took me, and I went outside to have a chat, and that's when I said to him, I said, "Look, I need you to come in by next month, end of next month, or I got to go find a different person, right?" And he accepted. Wasn't He accepted. It wasn't like it wasn't the warm fuzziest exception. He basically looked at me because Sam's, kind of a rough Italian dude and really smart guy, but he basically doesn't like ultimatums. So he kind of poked me in the chest. He said, "Fine, I'm in." He goes, "But don't you ever give me an effing ultimatum again." And I'm like, "All right, I'm going to either choose to be a little bit scared or happy right now." I said, "I'm going to choose happy because this is where we want to go."
You
So
made him an
yeah,
offer he couldn't refuse, probably.
yeah. Oh, and it turned out to be great for all of us,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He's gone on, I mean, I'll give you that I can give the story about what happened later, but he's gone on and started a couple businesses and been super successful. So he was the right person at the right time and we already knew each other. So it was great. And then later, right after that dinner, I went to meet my friends at a bar down the street. And that's where I met my wife. So I met her that
Okay,
night
see, I
and
see.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
one of the best days
So,
of your life. Now I
yes,
get it. So
yes,
Eric, let's take me back to the grind because you kind of skipped to, okay, we started the company, which was Compete, right? That was already the name of
yep,
it, and then you grew. Before you knew it, you grew to 12 people. But you know, well, I personally didn't get much further than the 12 than the dozen people level, but that's quite a, I mean, that can go very fast or it can be a slow grind, right? So can you take me back
yeah,
to that early grind? Did you did
sure.
you did you rent an office space in Silicon Valley there? Did you do it from
No.
home for starters? What was the daily grind? What did that look like? Cold
All right. So it
pizzas.
started out, yes, it started out, I lived out of a hotel for the first 2 months. So
Okay.
I lived out of the Marriott courtyard by the Gap in San Bruno, right? I wasn't right downtown, I was in San Bruno. And I would basically, I still had my apartment in San Francisco. So these are expenses. And I rented a car and I'd go back and forth. I think I rented a car. No, no, no. I drove my car to San Francisco. I used my car. So I had like this temporary space, and then I ended up getting an apartment in the city. I had to choose: do I want to live down here? I'm like, no, I really want to be in the city. So I would do like it was like a 30-minute commute every day, not bad, and and it was just me, right? And so I'm always impatient, right? That's one of my strengths, and also one of my weaknesses is I tend to move too fast sometimes. Um, and I was just constantly thinking about how do we grow this thing? How do we grow this thing? And the first little bit of growth was I had a guy that I knew who was actually the son of one of the guys I worked with at Loyola University to do that little side project. And he knew the product as well. So I brought him in as a subcontractor. And he came out to San Francisco, got an apartment, and he was my second person on that project. And funny story, I forgot about this part. During that project, right, there was an IBM exec, and I don't remember his name. And even if I did, I wouldn't mention it. We really kind of butted heads for some reason. I don't think he liked the fact that I was a subcontractor or brought someone else in. So while I was gone on a 3-day weekend skiing somewhere, he attempted to clip my subcontractor and pull him into IBM. And so the subcontractor came to me and said, "Well, this guy did this." And I sat down with him in a conference room. I said, "Hey, I just want to talk about this thing that happened." And that meeting got a little fiery because he basically just read me the riot act. I said, "Look, that's just unethical. Like, you shouldn't do that, right?" And again, I'm a bit naive too. I try to actually keep that part of my personality. It's okay to not know. It's okay to be a little bit naive, because that's what releases your brain from stopping you from doing things, right? It's like
Right, so
all the things that can go wrong.
yeah. So just to be clear, IBM tried to poach your subcontractor. Yeah,
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 this person in IBM Consulting did. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
thought that was pretty snaky. And that
yeah,
so I was trying to grow it. And then what happened was I got a call one day from a group of guys out in the Midwest, Wisconsin, that were attempting to do the same thing. There were 3 guys that said, "Hey, we're going to start a consultancy. We want to kind of pick your brain." And as I was talking to them, I'm like, "Why don't you just join us? I'll cut you in as partners. We'll cut you guys in as, I forget what we did, 10% ownership, I think, each, and let's just grow the team." And so there was a guy named Fred, Joe, and Adam, right? And so I remember we would have our meetings. By then now Sam had joined, and we opened an office in the Chicago area. So we did have a physical location in Chicago, and they were working in that office. So I would fly from San Francisco. We'd meet at Carlucci's near the airport, the Italian restaurant. And I remember we'd sit there around the table and we just discuss how it would all work. And so then these 3 guys got on board, and actually Sam was not in at that time. That's right. This is before Sam. So we did not have an office yet. And then we were 5, right? And then I talked to some of the folks that I knew at IBM, that knew the product. One woman was was an excellent trainer, Courtney Spooner. Another one, Denise Hatzidakis, was an amazing developer. And I would not really poach from IBM, but I would actually go to IBM, and when these people were wanting to leave, I'd say, "Look, the right way to do this is to talk to your manager, tell them that you want to leave, tell them that you want to join Compete. So you're not really leaving IBM. You're leaving IBM, but you're now supporting IBM in a different way." And every time we did that, and usually the choice was I could do this or I could go somewhere else to a competitor, right? Usually the IBM folks were helpful. So that's the way that we grew. We pulled some people in from IBM that knew the product really well, and then we built a team of some training folks and some development or some delivery folks, and then eventually sales folks. So that's how we grew it. But it seemed to take forever at the time. I think that, 94 was just me. 95 was just Bob and I. 96, I think, was when we got to 12. And then once Sam came in and we really opened up that sales pipeline, then from 96 to 99, we went from 12 to just about 100 people.
wow.
And I remember this because San Francisco was all about software, right? And I was kicking myself at the time going, "Man, I really wish we would have done software," because I feel like an outsider. Like, I'm not really part of Silicon Valley because I'm not building something, I'm doing services.
Yeah.
But then late in the 90s or mid 90s, all of a sudden the stock prices of a lot of these consulting companies started skyrocketing. Viant, Cyient, Razorfish. I remember I was tracking them. And once again, I'm like, "Gosh, how did I miss this? I mean, I'm here." And then things started happening. We started getting calls from companies that wanted to acquire us. And that's what led to the next phase.
So that's, I mean, what you're describing now is right in the middle of the dot com bubble,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like
it is.
smack in
It
the
is
middle.
hot and heavy.
Yeah,
Yes, I mean,
yeah,
all the infrastructure, the cable. I mean, all the fiber optics were being laid by Level 3 and 3Com, and we all got kind of know what happened there. It was like this big boom, and then you had Toys.com, and Webvan was a big thing, right? So just too early. It shows that timing is everything.
Yep.
I remember I had a um, I had, it's a longer story, but I had spent time. I actually moved back to Chicago for less than a year, like 9, 12, 10 months, and brought my girlfriend with me, now my wife. And I ended up being on the road, not just in places in the US. I spent 2 months in Leeds, England, working for Asda stores. I spent 2 months in New Zealand, in Auckland, working for National Insurance, again, big projects. And then I was supposed to go to Paris to do 2 months of work, actually subcontracting back to IBM to help them with product development. Um, and I remember getting the Paris job, and my poor girlfriend, who knew nobody in Chicago, was down in the middle of the worst winter ever. And she had a job at Bloomingdale's because she's in retail. So she would take the L and freeze her butt off. And it was just miserable. Though she liked Chicago. And so my dad would come down from the suburbs because we're when they lived, and pick her up, and they'd go cook for the weekend, and they got to be really close friends, which helped with my decision because my dad took me aside and said, look, I've met some of your other girlfriends. They weren't great. This one's a keeper. He says, you screw this up, she's in the family, you're out. So he gave me an ultimatum.
Okay.
So
Okay.
when we went through all that, you know, my girlfriend at the time, and my wife now, Tony, when Paris came up, she came home from work. I said, would you be interested in going to Paris with me for 2 months and quitting your job? And I negotiated with IBM, because I said, look, I'll do the gig, but I'm going to lose this girl if I don't bring her with me. So I need expenses for her to come along. And I negotiated that. So we spent 2 months in Paris. And then while we were in Paris, we decided that we wanted to move back to San Francisco because we missed it. And so we moved back, and I bought a condo. One of the biggest mistakes in my life, not buying that condo, was selling it in 2002. But
I
I
got
bought a
it.
condo on the Embarcadero, right under the Bay Bridge, in a building called Portside. And it was a fabulous place. And I remember thinking, I'm going to pay $370,000 for a 1,400 square foot condo. That's insane. And now it's like, oh my gosh, the condo is worth about 5 times that, or whatever it is. Um, but we ended up back there because we love San Francisco. And so then all these companies, right? All the .com is going nuts. Webvan was parked in the parking lot right across the street, so we could see all these vans, and all these companies were doing interesting things with food delivery and et cetera. And it was just
What
an
are one of the
exciting.
most nutty use cases or nutty companies in terms of explosive growth and maybe just wacky ideas even that were just fully riding on that bubble? Like what are some of the wacky?
Gosh. Well, the one that I remember very well, there's actually you could find it. There's a show on it that they did, a documentary. It was called Startup Dreams, I believe. It's
Okay.
about a company called Cosmo.com. Cosmo.com, and this is going to sound familiar. No, they would just say, hey, it was really targeted at, the stoner community. Hey, look, if you've got the munchies, we'll bring you Twizzlers, right? At the middle of the night, we'll bring you whatever food, just door delivery service. And that was one that had started up and started going nuts, right? And then they did a documentary on it, but they did the documentary after the .com bust. So you
Sure.
see the arc of these. Man, I really feel for entrepreneurs. Like sometimes you have the best idea at just the wrong time. Trust me, I'm used
That
to
was
that.
my next question, actually. Yeah. So, what are some of the best ideas that you saw around that in that era that just didn't make it because
um,
timing wasn't right, or marketing wasn't right, or the product market fit
yeah,
wasn't?
so definitely Cosmo and Webvan, right? Because look at today, right? It was just too early. The technology wasn't there.
Yep.
The demand, you had to really sell this new service that people weren't used to, and eventually, 20 years later, it's all the rage, right? So that was one of the key ones I remember. Then you had things like pets.com and toys.com, which were websites dedicated to selling things. And back then it's a lot harder to deal with the logistics, right? The warehouse, the
Sure.
shipping, the credit card payments, all of that. So they were early pioneers that that cratered because their valuations went nuts. And then there wasn't enough. It was, a member back then. It was, hey, eyeballs, right? It doesn't matter how much money you're making. It just means that you're getting eyeballs on your website.
Yeah.
Kind of a cautious tale for some folks right now with AI, if you ask me, because I'm
That's
seeing the same sort
definitely
of craziness.
definitely something I want to
Yep.
ask you about a little bit later. But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
because so listen, I told you the year I was born, so I was very young, so I kind of got the gist of it, right? So when I was young,
Yeah.
when I was like 15 years old or something, I kind of got the gist of
Yeah.
what was happening here in the Netherlands. Even we had a lot of companies that, we had World Online, which was a very big one here, like an
Oh, yeah.
internet company, but it was, it completely, blew. I mean, I think they
Yeah.
sold right before the bubble burst, but so we
Yeah.
kind of got the gist of it, but
Yeah.
didn't
Well,
fully ever. Yeah.
gaming was another one, right? So this first Sony PlayStation was a huge hit. I remember I waited in line outside the
Oh
Metreon to
yeah,
get it.
magical time,
Um,
man.
and then
Magical.
before that, I mean, again, I'm a technology guy, so I bought the 3DO system. There's that Trip Hawkins created. That thing cratered. So there was lots of video game attempts, right? And it was all about platform, and all these new platforms were competing. That had been going on for years, and there's a ton of failure there until now. Look at the video game industry; it's insane, right?
Yeah.
But same sort of thing. There was all this innovation, all this, all these startup ideas. I remember, I read a book when I first did the company called, I think it was just called Startup. And it was about a guy who, who was basically built a competitor to the Apple Newton and kind of before the Palm Pilot. Fascinating story of, again, bright idea, just the timing and the what took to get that idea through. And the book talks about his journey through this startup and actually ultimately failed. But I use that as inspiration to say, hey, look, this is going to be hard. I should try to find that book and reread it, because I actually remember gave it to my friend Bob, who joined me right after the company, to read. I inscribed it like, hey, here's the journey. Hope this doesn't scare you away, right? But so Macromedia was a really cool company too. They were a success story because I'd go to the Macromedia offices in San Francisco and meet my girlfriend who was working there, and there was just this buzz of creatives all building new tooling for doing websites and doing all sorts of creative stuff. And they
Yeah.
ended up getting absorbed by Adobe.
So back in that
And you
day.
had things like, well, sorry, you had things like Napster too. Video streaming
Oh
was
yeah.
brand new. All that stuff was like, it just like everywhere you look, there was something new going on.
Napster, you said Napster? Oh
Napster, yeah.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I knew some
definitely.
Napster folks.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Sean Parker was the founder of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got it. The guy.
And then this is years later when, you had MySpace and then Facebook, but it's
Sure.
funny side story. We're watching 2020 back in, oh gosh, 2007, 2008. And they were interviewing a guy, Scott DeWolf, or some, I think his name was Scott, maybe had a different first name. He was one of the founders of MySpace. And as we're watching it, my pregnant wife sits and goes, oh, I dated that guy. I'm
No
like,
way.
what? And I go, he's like minted now. I said, you screwed that up. And she's like, yeah, he was a nerd. And I go, have you looked at who you married? What's going on here? So all sorts of fun stories of just like, it's like you were 1 degree separated from all these different people.
Yeah.
Chris Isaac used to play at the local pub where my wife would go, and she knew Chris Isaac before he went big. So she was in San Francisco years earlier than me.
You mean
She's
Chris Isaac, the guy from damn, what's the name of the song?
oh
Wicked Games?
You Wicked Game. Yeah, Wicked Game. So he was
Oh,
just a local musician that then hit it big. So she
right,
would,
right. Yeah, I
it's just,
remember that.
again, I love the San Francisco stories, that you just, run into people that ended up being successful or famous or doing, just everyone was doing something interesting, like I said.
So who was the most famous person that you met back in that era?
God. Well, probably John Elway, but that was different. He came back I'd go to Stanford all the time, and he showed up at the Rose and Crown, and we'd be playing darts and so stuff like that. I'm trying to think. There's probably several others. I actually met more famous people in Austin because Austin had this really nice community where the actors and actresses didn't get bothered, right? So you'd
Back
be
then
hanging
even?
out.
Ah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, back in like even just early to mid 2000s, There'd be guys like Sandra Bullock would work out at the gym, and she was a very, very nice person. You chat with her.
Oh,
And again, I'm
nice.
not like I'm name dropping, but I met these people once.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Luke
Yeah.
Luke Wilson would eat at the local Maudis, and you'd see him at parties, and you'd have a conversation with him. Lance Armstrong,
Right, of
stuff like
course.
that.
Austin native. Yeah. I was a big
Yeah.
cycling fan, when I
Okay.
was younger
Uh,
because that it's a huge sport in Europe, of course.
yeah.
Yeah, I watched all those Tour de France from Lance
Oh
Armstrong,
yeah.
every
Well,
single one of them with my
Austin.
dad. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt lucky, and I've skipped that part of the story, but like I ended up in Austin because we sold to a public company,
Yeah.
and Austin had that same. I just got so lucky to go from San Francisco to Austin in 2000, and Austin was just starting to boom. Everyone in Austin said, "Oh, you're ruining it," because it was always just a small, cool town. And
Yeah.
in 2000, it was still pretty tight, and then it really exploded over the last 10 years.
Right, right. Yeah, I heard stories about that. Okay, so back to the dot-com bubble, as they say. So how easy was it back then? Because I heard these crazy stories also, later on about, capital flowing in, of course. And usually,
Yeah.
a lot of the times with companies who just had literally just an idea or
Yeah.
something, not even a working product, let alone revenue. Like
Yep.
what were one of the craziest valuations that you saw, like one of the just
So
craziest funding
I'll be
stories?
honest with you. I was completely blind to the venture scene
Yeah,
because because I'm a services company. I
right.
bootstrapped everything, right? We didn't need to raise money. This ended up hurting me later when we pivoted into software for ClearBlade because I really had no clue how to raise money. I wasn't known in those circles. We had made money for the founders of Compete, but we didn't make money for outside investors because we didn't take any outside
And so
money.
you completely bootstrapped Compete from 0 to 100 people. And then
Yep.
you, at some point, and I think this was right before the bubble burst, you were able to sell it. But it was an honest day's work, right? Because it was
It was.
truly a consultancy business. It wasn't just an imaginary product that.
Yeah, it was. We had built up the really good dialogue with IBM. We had friends in the right places. We had insight into product. We worked closely with the labs, and we had built this really nice practice that was well known within IBM and in their rational division at the time.
Yep.
So when we sold to a company called Proficient, that was a they went public with 8 people in '99. So that's the craziest story that I heard. Right. Vignette, if you've ever, there's a company called Vignette that had gone gangbusters.com in Austin. So Vignette had kind of spun out, like there's some consultants that spun out and started this business called Proficient. And then they brought in a CEO from New York, and they had investors, big time names on the board, like Frank King and the guy that was leading EDS at the time. I can't remember his name right now, but big, 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 well known dudes, right? And they had their plan was, let's go buy up these services companies and roll them up into a big consultancy. And that's we were the first major acquisition. So we
Right.
were actually bigger than Proficient when they acquired us. So Proficient was public on the
Right. But
NASDAQ,
they were funded,
and
so they were able to acquire you.
so they
Yeah.
acquired us. And then we got some cash up front, which was more money than I thought I'd ever see. It was pretty nice. And then 80% of it was in stock. And so this is my .com story, which is okay. We sold it in May of 2000. I moved to Austin, Texas, right? I'm integrating with the team. I'm doing, they're putting me in whatever places I can help. And then we're recruiting, like we're going on boat trips in Lake Austin. We're adding people, add anyone with a heartbeat that had some sort of degree, right? This is the tail end of the .com. We didn't know it yet. And
Yep.
then the stock, which was $28 a share when we did the deal in May, dropped all the way down to 36 cents, right? And we were locked up for 2 years.
Oh, yeah. You had some sort
So
of.
so lots, yeah. So to me, I'm like, all right, I never lamented the fact that that happened because I had no control. There was no decision I could make because I was locked up for those 2 years.
Right.
And and then, the company struggled. We are going to get delisted on the NASDAQ. So basically what I decided to do is, look, my job is to sell. and sell more services and keep going. And we had some success in helping new IBM product called WebSphere Portal knock out one of their major competitors called Plumtree, because I inherited a Plumtree practice. And this is when the .com is crashing, and they had a contract with Proficient. And my first conversation with the exec at Plumtree did not go well. There was, I introduced myself, and the next words out of this guy's mouth were, "You can go F yourself." And I went,
That's nice.
okay. And so I immediately called an exec I knew at IBM and said, "Hey, you guys are working on a product that's going to compete with Plumtree, right?" And he said, "Yep." I said, "Can you put me in touch with that executive?" And he did. And I met with him out in San Francisco at a bar called Jillian's outside the Moscone Center. We had beers. And I said, "Look, I have a team now that knows the ins and outs of Plumtree. They know the good, the bad, the ugly. I've got a WebSphere team that knows the good, the bad, the ugly of WebSphere, and you're building this WebSphere portal product. What if we kind of merged, what you folks are doing and lent our services and our expertise in the competitor to figure out where they're weak and where you can attack and build into your product? And all I need to bring back to my CEO, because we're trying to build revenue, is some sort of IBM contract that will allow us to do this." I think it was like $50,000 blue dollar. So those are, ways that IBM can support you. And I brought it back to the CEO at the time at Proficient, Jack McDonald, and we went gangbusters with that product, and we built a services business on it. At the time, because the .com was happening, I didn't think I'd last another week or two at Proficient, because I was already getting ready. I'm like, this is going south. And so I ended up staying longer than I expected. My other friends left and went and did other things, and I stayed for a few more years, and then I went on my. So it was that with my real .com crash story was in Austin, helping Proficient stay viable. And then I think 2 years ago it was end of 24. Proficient sold to a private equity firm for like $3 billion.
When was that?
24, I think
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
would have had to stay. I
So
left it in 2003, so I would have had to stay a long
yeah,
time.
no stock options.
I don't know. So that's actually a good part of the story.
Yeah.
It kind of leads into all the craziness I did in between Proficient and ClearBlade. Is after I left, my wife was doing real estate, and she just didn't love it. And all her and her girlfriend, they paired together. What we talk about is retail. They both came from San Francisco, and they didn't know each other there. They met in Austin, and they're like, there just aren't the shops, and we want to do a store. And so the entrepreneur in me said, well, let's go do that. I went to my wife and I said, look, you've been following me around for years. Why don't you take first chair now, and I'll support you.
Yeah.
And so we built a clothing store called Girl Next Door. Such a fun business, by the way. Such a hard way to make money. I understand now why it's called a lifestyle business, but I got to know the Austin community. I got to know the wives, and that's where I met a lot of the famous people, a lot of musicians, like Sean Colvin, if you know who she is, and oh gosh, what's her name? Anyway, Amy Adams would come in, and you'd have these stars come in. And I'd be in the back room doing the online stuff because I was the tech guy,
Yeah.
putting up the images, and I'd have to peek out and go, "Who's out there?"
So you already had a web shop back then?
Yeah, so that's another. It was hard back then.
All right.
We'd have to do all our photo shoots and the
Yeah.
whole deal.
Let's stick to the deal. To the deal. Yeah. To the stock
Yeah,
options and
yeah. So the options I had, right. So I stuffed them all in my E-Trade account, and because I bought all my options when I left, because I'm like, well, why not? They were 37 cents or whatever, or the strike price was slow. And then as I'm at Girl Next Door, and that thing's burning cash. One, no offense to my wife, it's just a hard business.
Yeah.
And I was doing improv and other things and films, and then I needed money, and then the Proficient stock went up to $1 to $2 to $3 to $4, all the way up, And so I just kept selling every kind of inflection point. I'd sell 50,000 shares here, 50,000 shares there. And I had a bunch of them. So I used that to fund all this other stuff I was doing. And kind of the way I treated it was like monopoly money, because I didn't feel like I just maybe not deserve, maybe I felt like I got paid enough on the 20%. And this is just monopoly money that just came out of nowhere because I had already written it off. So in my mind, I'm like, okay,
Right.
let's just use this to do whatever.
So Eric, just
So
to go back to actually making the, selling the business, right? Selling Compete.
yeah,
So
yeah,
of course, a lot of people think that when you sell a business for, what was it? What was the number that was attached to it?
60, 63 million.
Right. So they think, oh, that's just, you're set for life. That's cash. That's it. I'm
So did
done.
I.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
did
Well,
I.
sure, sure. So, but what they often don't see is that deals can be structured in various ways, right? You have earnout models, you have stock options and stuff like that, and then
Yes,
of
all
course you
that.
have,
Yep.
yeah, you have your partners. So what did that deal look like back then? Because you had three, I think you had three partners, right?
We
At,
partners, and yeah, and then a couple more smaller. I think at the time, we had, you know, 4 or 5, and I think we were early. We did options for the employees. This is early
oh
days.
yeah,
I remember going to a special professor in Oakland with my CFO and CEO to figure out how to do options and
yeah,
Black-Scholes model. We learned about all this stuff. It kind of went over my head, and so we had all our employees had a stake. But when we did the deal, yes, there was an earnout. We had to maintain X amount of people from the current company for a certain
yep,
amount of time. We had to generate X amount of revenue. We did all that. And then, everything kind of just went sideways. And that, then people kind of went their own ways. There's tons of politics whenever you get acquired, right? And
sure,
at some point, I was in the mix. I was a board observer. I did all this, and I just said too many things, right? They kicked me off the board because I was supposed, no one told me the rules. I was supposed to be quiet, and I would sit there and interject all the time and say things. And next thing I know, the next meeting, the door's locked. So yeah, you're good. Go back and do your thing.
so
So
so so
again,
to,
I was
but
naive.
to break down the deal, so we have the, what was it, 63 million dollars, right?
63 million,
So
20% cash,
right,
and the rest in stuff
yeah, so 20% cash in total.
in total, right?
Yeah.
So,
So and
I
what
think
was your,
I ended up net. So I got there were 2 tranches. I think I got $1 million in the first one. I remember I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember back then you could call in your bank and you could hear your balance. And I recorded it. And I mean,
how
I
many
wasn't bragging,
how
but
many
like
times did you do that?
about 17. And I just couldn't believe it. Right. And
Right.
then I looked at one of the reasons I was not going to move to Texas because I love San Francisco so much. I was not even going to stay. I'd already planned I'm going to just cash out and go. And then I got the tax bill from California. I went, ooh, I should go buy a
Right.
house in Texas. So
Right.
so it's funny, while the other executives got moved and they get their stuff paid for, I just paid for my own move to Austin, bought a house, much smaller than the one that the agent wanted me to buy because I was an executive. I remember what he said to me.
Sure.
We're looking at a nice house. We're only 2 people, and in the suburbs, that wasn't this big fancy Barton Creek house. And he's like, and I'm like, oh no, I like this house. I'll take it. He goes, why would you buy here? This is for middle managers. And I looked at him. I go, yeah, I'm definitely taking this house.
Yeah, he tried to
It
shame
just, I
you. He
just
tried to
wasn't.
shame you into, or ego trip you
Yeah,
into something
and
bigger.
I'm just not that guy. I mean, I like being part of a team. To me, I'm no different than I was when I was slinging code at IBM. I'm just another part of the organization. Um, so that's just my mindset. Always has been. And so like that, like motivated me just to buy that house. Thank goodness, by the way, because then we get to Austin and I'm just kind of like all my friends that I hired were in corner offices with windows, and I'm out in a cubicle in the middle of the pit, right? Um, basically cold call, doing whatever, right? Because I had not planned on being part of the bigger team, and they had not planned on it, I don't think, right? So I was kind of a loose cannon, I guess, that they didn't know what to do with. So, and then I did my thing and it worked out. But during that time is when the .com busted. 9/11 happens, right? Just
Right,
all
of
this
course.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember I got stuck in Denver for a week because I was going to a football game for the opening of Invesco Field. The next morning, everything broke loose. It was horrible.
Yeah.
But but I just it was weird because I had this place in San Francisco still. I had the place in Austin, and then the world comes crashing down. And that's when I decided to sell in 2002, which was the one time I get conservative in my life was the wrong thing to do. Right. I sold it for 600 or something. Um, and, and it was the right thing to do then, but you look back, oh man, if I just would have held on, that would have been better. But that's when I experienced the dot-com bust in Austin, Texas. Vignette, which was this high flyer, also went from several $100s a share
Oh
down, and
man,
that business
how was
cratered.
the what was the panic level like? Because you had already moved to Austin, you weren't in Silicon Valley anymore. Maybe you traveled there, at times. But what did you get a
It
glimpse of the panic, like of the ground zero
sure did.
panic? Yeah,
Sure did.
man.
Because I go
Oof.
back, San Francisco was really rough. Austin, you had a few companies like Vignette that really got hit, but you still had Dell underpinning, the main attention of the city, and Dell did fine.
Yep.
What helped Proficient ironically, was IBM, because IBM didn't suffer near as bad in the dot-com. In fact, they did well. And so that business was the anchor that kept Proficient going, right? All their Vignette business dried up, all their Plumtree business dried up, Motive and some other companies they were doing work for. And I was working with some startups. Now I remember it's a company called Curion at the time that was doing some interesting web things. And then they couldn't pay their bills. And I remember they called the CEO in that I was working with at Curion into the boardroom. And I felt really uncomfortable because I'm just sitting there. And then both CEOs just went at it. It was ugly, because they couldn't pay their bills and Proficient was struggling. So things got really tense. So I saw it from the boardroom side. I saw it obviously in the papers. And then when I go visit San Francisco. So it was a strange time. We went from recruiting trips to layoffs. So actually, I blocked this out of my memory because I spent a good year just laying people off, and that was horrible.
A lot of
Um,
personal tragedies.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. There was a movie years later that George Clooney did called Up in the Air, which is about flying in and getting rid of people. I remember watching that movie, and I had to turn it off halfway through. I said, "This is bringing back some bad memories." So I
Yeah.
don't want to go through it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so it
mean,
was hard.
it's the same with that excellent movie called it's Margin Call, right? I think it's about
Right.
it's about the credit and financial crisis of 2008 ish.
Oh yeah,
Margin
yep.
Call. That's the vibe that they created there in that movie to sort of capture that feeling at the of panic at the time. I can
Yeah,
imagine that there were some parallels there, maybe at a bit smaller
totally.
scale in San Francisco.
Yeah, so it was
Okay,
tough.
yeah.
It was tough. Once I left and we were doing retail, it's funny, I was in a whole different world. I was out of tech for a few years. I was focused on women's clothing and going to LA for fashion shows and going to New York and meeting different stars there, right? You run into Kanye West or the Hilton sisters or Daphne Seninga, who was one of my favorites in the 80s movies growing up. Just that was just a cool divergence for me, or diversion from what I think I needed to decompress. I was burned out after all the layoffs. And in 2003, I tore my ACL. So I was working from home. And while I was doing that, I realized Proficient really didn't need me or really didn't want me at the time. It's just time to move on. Right? I wasn't being challenged.
Yeah, all right. Let's move on to the most recent, I guess, the recent decade, the last decade of your life or so, which has been
Yep.
all about founding and running and growing and pivoting ClearBlade, right? And
Yep.
that's also
Yep.
how we started, communicating and working together for a little bit.
Mhm.
Because we had the pleasure at NOCO to work on the ClearBlade brand, the brand strategy, and the positioning and the website. Super fun. That's also one of the reasons why I invited you, because the energy was great, all around and all throughout the process. But
Yep.
there's a story behind ClearBlade, and it's been quite a long one, in terms of how you got here, right? Because
Yep.
and a lot of it is also tied to IBM, I think, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
to how you
Totally.
made your
So,
start. So let me just break it down in layman's terms, right? Because so when I heard IoT, the term IoT, I always thought of refrigerators connected to the internet and stuff like that. But that is not
That's
that is
exactly it.
that's
Yeah,
not what there was this hype cycle
it
also
is,
about
but yeah,
IoT. Yeah, it is, but that's not your ball game.
no,
It's industrial scale IoT, I would say. So
yes,
how
yeah,
on earth, with everything you just told us, did you get into that space?
yeah.
And it's 2026, and take it away. The floor is yours, Senator.
Yeah, oh, yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. We're gonna have to do some editing on this thing, but I get it.
No, no,
The
no.
good stories, though.
This is
The
going
good.
to be raw. So keep in mind, Eric.
All right,
So break it down for us. Break it down for us.
all right, all right, all right. Well, one, I got to say, you guys at NoCo do fabulous work. We were website challenged for years here at ClearBlade because we're a bunch of engineers, not marketing professionals, and NoCo did fantastic and try to understand a complex business. So I got to give you your plug. It's awesome stuff.
Thanks. It was
Um,
fun. It was fun.
yeah, it was great. So in gosh, so it's been like almost 20 years now. 2007. Um, I had a bunch of investments. So not only did I do Girl Next Door and some film, and we go into that later. I had done a bunch of venture investments, angel investments, and real estate investments. So in 2007, all the stuff that I was in was starting to give me bad news. So I kind of saw the precursor of '08, and I was looking at, and my wife is pregnant with our second kid. Actually, no, she got pregnant right after that. Anyway, we had a baby and then eventually had another one. And during this time, I'm watching the numbers going down, and I'm generating no income. I'm burning, right? We're burning on the store and burning on our life and other things. So I just started saying, look, I got to get back to work. Let me get back in the tech field where I know how to do something. And my old partner, Sam, was talking to me about joining his company. That he grew a company called Ascendant. So I flew out to Denver and talked to some of the principals there. They were trying to build a practice like what we did before. And at the same time, I was vacationing with the same execs that I had worked with all years ago in Cancun. So we had timeshares together where families knew each other. And we're at the pool bar, and I'm talking about, thinking about joining and doing these things. And the IBM guy came to me and said, look, we definitely need another company like you did with Compete, because no one's supporting this new version of our product set. And you should do this on your own, because look, why would you go join someone else? Go do it on your own, and we'll back you. Like, just basically, we'll give you business, right? We'll help you get up to speed. So I'm like, all right. So we had lots of margaritas. So I just basically decided then I'm going to do this. And I went back to Austin, and then I kept working on a name. And then I realized, oh my gosh, in 2003, I had already bought the URL for ClearBlade, because me and a couple of friends were going to do a startup right away around wireless devices and connectivity. So kind of similar. But my heart wasn't in it. I was just spent, right? So I'm like, that's a great name. Let's use that. And I incorporated by myself in August of 2007, and then started doing my old thing again, which was, let me learn the software, let me build my frameworks, let me do my technical thing, and let's start closing deals. So it started the same way, and IBM put me on helped me find some projects to help customers here and there. We did some work for the government of Bahamas. I'm trying to remember, did some work in Albany, New York for their government. So just little projects here or there. Then I started adding a few people in '08. Different environment though than '94 was, because '08, the winds weren't at my back; they were in my face, right? So
Yeah.
that was tricky. And so we did have success though. We built that company up from 2007, got office space, an awesome location in Austin on 6th and 6th and Congress, right by the Frost Bank building, nice warehouse space, and grew that company like 30, 35 people, doing IBM services. So what we did was we'd go in and use this product to transform outdated legacy mainframe systems into something newer. Very, very complex projects. All of them were IBM led, and we would subcontract as the experts. And that was a great period of time. We did really big projects. We had success. And then things started to change around 2015 10, 11. The projects were difficult. IBM didn't include us in the scoping of these projects. And so when the project started and the tools were tricky, they weren't like, there was a lot of nuances and you really had to work through them. This is tough stuff too, when you have systems that are 30 plus years older and old tech. So it's like a archaeological dig, like go
Oh
through and
yeah.
figure it out and get it to work. And they're, imagine they were just tough to sell because you're basically telling a company, you need to spend millions of dollars on a system that works, but it's fragile and you don't know how to patch it, to a brand new system that gives you the same thing, but now it's solid. So there's no, it just seems like it's the same thing to the outside world. Anyway, IBM would scope these things. Then all of a sudden the customer would start pushing back on when's this going to be finished. They'd have us then give them estimates and they didn't like our estimates. So I'm like, well, I can't give you any better estimate because you weren't, you didn't ask us. So then they started turning down our rate. They started having people work part-time. It just wasn't sustainable. And I didn't really have the same partnership with this group that I did before. Like the lab still supported me, but it was a tougher deal. And so I'm sitting there going, gosh, this is not going the way the last one did. I don't see an upside. We got to pivot into something else. And I saw mobile taking off, right? And people, I'm competitive, right? The new company had started up in Austin that had done 10 million in revenue their first year. I'm like, gosh darn it. And they're doing mobile design, right? Mobile design and mobile. Back then you had to code for the Android and the iPhone separately, and it was all embedded,
Yep.
right? And so we said, let's go do that. And IBM had just acquired a company in 2012 called Worklight. So we said, great, we're going to jump in on this new product and be IBM services partner of choice for mobile development. And we landed a couple gigs, one at Liberty Mutual up in Boston, another one at USAA Insurance. And we were doing the mobile apps for these insurance companies. So, the,
First
the
generation of apps,
ostrich,
right? Truly the first
yeah,
generation
first
of those apps.
generation.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in the mix on building it. I was running the company. So I had a team out in each. And then the team went different ways. The one at Liberty Mutual was working with IBM on Worklight. The one at USAA, we did on our own. And we used a different product called Parse, which was a web-based database. And I don't think it had some code execution. So you'd move the code off the phone into the cloud. And Worklight was all client. And I've called my CTO up after he was on that project a while, because part of when you work with IBM, like what we did the first time, is you're not just a services partner. You would actually resell their software and package it with your services. So
Okay.
value-added reseller, it was the
Yep.
deal. So we'd make some margin on that, but we'd help IBM sell and then we'd service the project. So I called him to get information on, hey, give me some data points on how Worklight makes your job easier, what's great about it, so we can sell it. And then he got frustrated with me. He's like, I don't know what you mean. And I said, well, part of the plan is we're going to be a value-added resale. And Aaron, who does not swear often, does not say this doesn't blurt out often, basically just says, I don't know what you want from me. It's the worst effing product I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, crap. Right. So basically we made the wrong choice or whatever. And
I've
then
met I've met
so
Aa- I've met Aaron a couple of times now. So as he doesn't strike me as the person to drop f bombs.
no,
So it must have been really bad then.
no, yes, I remember I was in my car. I'm like, oh no. And so what happened from there, we were struggling at Liberty Mutual with a huge team, and we were really having success at USA Insurance with this Parse product, doing amazing things. And then, ironic, I'm in San Francisco for my IBM friend's 50th birthday. Right, the guy who I'd worked with while I was at IBM. He was one of the main architects of the product. He's an executive now, and we're there for his birthday. And I get up in the morning on a Friday and I see this news story pop up on my laptop. Parse bought by Facebook for 85 million. I'm like, holy crap. And so I made a couple calls to people I knew in Austin that knew Parse as well. I said, do you guys know what kind of revenue they had? And it was something around 2 million. It wasn't a lot. And they got
Oh
bought for
wow.
85. So the venture side of me went, all right, 37 and a half X
That's quite the
revenue.
multiplier. My God.
Yeah. And this is me, right? I just immediately lightning bolt. I pick up the phone and call Aaron, who's in Raleigh at the time. We had an office in Raleigh and one in Austin. And I said, tell me again all the things you hate about WorkLight. He went through it. Tell me the things you like about what Parsons do. And he told me, I said, well, they just got bought. So why don't we build the new parse for the enterprise? And
Right.
and I said, let's build software that can run not just in the cloud, but on any cloud. Let's build software that can connect to millions of phones concurrently and take all that workload off the phone. Let's build software that has this idea of client server. So like running at the edge, which is very early for edge compute. And he just basically said, you're absolutely insane, right? And I was. And I go, just think about it. And the thing that Aaron is fantastic at is if you just plant a seed, because he's always going to usually initially do this. And it's good that he does, because we would have gone in 27 different directions from a product standpoint.
Yep.
But after a few months, we just kept talking. And I wouldn't say I don't think I wore him down. I think he
You
started
just
really
broke him
looking at the
until the point there. I said, F it, I'm just gonna build it.
Yeah. Well,
So
I also had this belief that we could just take our 35 consultants and just transform them into developers. He had to educate me. He said, no, we need a different skill set for this. I'm like, oh crap. So basically, when we decided to do it, one, Aaron took it to another level. So this is where we're complete opposites, which is great. I'm not the guy to do all the planning, the studying, the research. Aaron does that. And I basically said, you're the CTO. You figure this out. He goes, I'm going to have to build a new team. I said, okay, let me figure out how to find jobs for most of these 35 people at Ascendant or some of the other companies that I knew that they'd be valuable at. So, and then I realized, holy crap, I gotta raise money to do this, because I'm not going to be generating income from services once I move off of that. We kept some of the projects. So that was the movement of early 2013 was go build product. I'll go reconfigure the business and I'll go raise money. So I got introduced to a bunch of angel investors. I knew a bunch of people. So I call it bootstrap capital. I didn't know how to raise venture money. I wasn't well known in those circles as an operator. They knew me as an investor. So they liked me when I put money in. But when I thought it'd be easy, and I go back to those same venture folks, say, hey, I'm doing this and I've had success before. And it was like, like, you're a services guy, you're going to build product now. That's a whole different game, which it totally is. So I focused on individual investors for the next several years. And then Aaron focused on product, and Aaron basically saw the vision, said he started building in this thing called an MQTT broker, because he had gone to some class at IBM about this new protocol, blah, blah, blah. And he built it into our product. And I remember going, why are we building this? Why? And he's like, Eric, we're going to do more than just phones. We're just going to connect to all things. I go, okay, sounds good. So he kept doing that. And that's how we basically pivoted completely into a software company. We launched our first two products in 2014, our IoT enterprise product in the cloud and on premise, and then our edge product later that year. So what's funny is our edge and our cloud are identical virtually. It's the same binary. One just runs on constrained Linux devices at the edge. The other runs in a scalable cloud environment. And so we were the only people to approach it that way that I can tell.
yeah.
We were peers of companies that got bought, like telemetry is a good example. So our team and their team would go to these San Francisco interop conferences where we'd all sit down and test our code against the spec. So we got to know, it was like a little community of folks. Well, in 2015, Amazon bought telemetry and launched their IoT service. And then Microsoft launched theirs, and then Google bought a company in 2017 called Xively, and they launched theirs. And so did 620 other companies.
Right. Quickly
So talk
saturated.
about being too early. We were definitely early, and we just had to weather the storm. And so what we decided during all this was, well, we're going to stay private. not by choice, but just by, we weren't out there marketing ourselves or selling ourselves as to be acquired. And then we're gonna focus on differentiating by engineering. And so we just had our nose to the grindstone. We found a really nice capital partner in Austin called Alliant Capital that helped us maintain our and grow in 2016. And so we had to weather every company that had physical devices decide to build a platform based on typically Microsoft or Amazon or IBM or Google, but they all used IP that was in the cloud already, tools to build. We built our own tool set. We built our own software from the ground up, which takes a lot of really complex engineering.
Exactly. So ultimately, and this is kind of your this is kind of your motto, right? Or kind of your the thing that you have mentioned quite a few times. You've been slowly but surely, you guys have been proven right in that the ClearBlade approach turns out, after all is said and done, as after all the IoT smoke has now cleared, it turns out that your initial approach was actually the right one. How
Seems that way. Yep.
Yeah, it seems that way now, right? Because the
Yeah.
market has, as quickly as it got saturated, that also turned around very quickly because all the big ones
Yep.
are, I think they're just exiting the market now. So why
Yep.
why are those big players exiting the market? What didn't work out for them? What was the
Revenue,
sure?
first and foremost, revenue, right?
Yeah,
So if you're Google and you're streaming, I don't know, a few $1 million from this service, it's nothing to you, right?
yeah,
So that's one of the things. Amazon still does it, Microsoft still does it, but they're supplying same thing, tools to engineers to build. They don't make a lot of money on it. It's all about getting workload on their cloud eventually as you connect up all these things. But this industry spent the last decade failing at a alarming rate at these builds. It's like 80% or more. Because IoT is extremely complex. It looks easy when you do a pilot, and it's massively hard at scale for all different types of devices.
hmm
And we took a different approach. So that's why they're like, look, Google, rightly so, we're going to deprecate our IoT core service. They did that. They announced it in 22, did it in 23. And they said, we're going to focus on the future, which is AI and data ingestion and our cloud, which makes tons of sense. IBM got out, SAP got out. I mean, all of these companies, right? Because they all took this similar approach, which is we're going to build tools for developers and then developers are going to build. Well, I don't care how great your tools are. We did the same thing, by the way. That's what ClearBlade launched first, was our tools. And then we landed big customers like Ream. And then we realized those customers are struggling with our tools as well. Even if they're better tools, even if they're more flexible, even if they at scale, they're more efficient, you still have to build your solution. So, so what we did during COVID, so again, there's 620 companies fighting this out. It's starting to sift out. The experts like Gartner are telling people to keep doing it this way, which they're, no offense, Gartner, but you're absolutely wrong. Um, uh, then COVID hits and we're like, here we go again, right? More drama, more of a struggle. So we do have a thing at ClearBlade that we call grind. It's Muhammad Ali's. I got a poster of Muhammad Ali where he's one of my heroes growing up. And
yeah,
it's all about the hard work and the stuff that people don't see that you do behind the scenes. Success is never easy. And you've got to put in the hard work to get there. So, that's what we did again. And what we did during COVID was take a look at what was slowing all our customers down, right? The rail companies we actually closed some very decent size, good size enterprise customers in 2016. We got BNSF Rail, and now we've got CN and Chicago Metro, and then we've got Ream and others. So we were having success. And we knew it worked. And we had champions that had gone through the exercise of comparing ClearBlade to IBM, to Microsoft, to Ayla Networks, to all these other companies that were much bigger, and they would pick us if they did their homework. But in fact, the first big enterprise deal we sold, the exec brought us in and said, "You won the scorecard hands down. You beat everybody, and you're by far the smallest company we're looking at. So how do you support us?" My simple answer to him was, "Pay us enough." Yeah, and it worked. We got it going. So During COVID, we decided to build the solution as opposed to just the tools.
Yep.
So we said, look, what is slowing down Ream and BNSF and all these other customers, Boeing, right? And it's like, well, everybody's got to build the end solution with our product. Why don't what we've seen is a similar pattern at every company. I don't care if you're tracking airplane maintenance parts, if you're tracking monitoring railroad crossings or tracking rail cars or communicating with water heaters. It's the same problem. How do you connect? How do you stream the normalized data to your enterprise systems or your AI tools? And then what is the process of looking at a dashboard, of setting alerts, of setting rules, of doing all this? And so they're all similar, right? Everybody wants a different look and feel. So we said, all right, let's build something called intelligent assets and let's target the business user, not the developer, because the developers already have pride of creation and ownership of something they're building. And these poor people don't know how many more mountains they have to cross because we've been doing it this whole time and they're going to struggle. And they're also going to be resistant to bringing someone in that has a solution. So we built a no code product that allows an operator to select what type of equipment they want to monitor, select what parameters they want to get out of that piece of equipment and display without needing to drop into code. And so we spent 2020, 2021, 2022 really working on this product while we were still selling our enterprise product. Mm-hmm. And then we started realizing we've got to sell this as our primary product and just use our IP as underneath all of it.
Yep.
And so it took a long way for us to get through that 620 competitors, pretenders, or what will mostly services companies, right? And the big, I skipped one major part of the story, which was the big coming out party for us was Google, right? When Google announced they were deprecating their IoT core, they tapped 10 different companies to say, hey, go fight it out and take the business.
Yep.
We were, again, the smallest, I believe, or one of the smallest, but we were the only pure play software company. So what we did was, hey, look, Google's got these 300, 400 customers, whatever, I don't know what their total number was. But what we're going to do is we're going to basically mirror what the Google service was doing, which in my opinion is a low-level service for connectivity, some basic stuff. But what we did is say, all right, that's just an application in our system. Let's make it walk like a duck, talk like a duck. Let's price it exactly like that same duck so the customer doesn't have any impact. And let's give away a free product that converts from Google IoT Core over to ClearBlade IoT Core, all while staying on the Google Cloud. So we obviously don't want to cannibalize that. So that's what we did. And I think took 80% of that business. So we went from under 30 customers, maybe 25 or so, to 300 in a year.
Yep.
Now, a lot of those customers we don't even know what they're doing. They're in Asia, they're in Europe, they're in North America. We don't know what devices they're connecting. Some are in this free tier that, don't make any money. But we did it as a coming out party to prove that we could do it. And it ended up being a pretty decent revenue stream as a group to the business, just under $1 million a year. And all the other folks, they got one or two or none. And so Google was a bit surprised that we were the one that climbed out of that pit.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a testament to the engineering that we spent all this time on.
Yeah, and it's a great bridge, I guess, also because you have big plans for the future.
Yep.
And you've weathered the storm. You've outlived almost all of the competitors, I guess, the competing systems.
Yep.
And slowly but surely, the market is moving towards the ClearBlade approach.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, you're
We're
already
just too early.
That's possible. Yeah, it sure seems like it. So can you just also, to make it a little bit more tangible for those watching, you already mentioned a couple of use cases like the railroad systems. Well, can you name a few very notable use cases that are instantly recognizable and that also kind of explain how important this type of enterprise grade connectivity is?
Yep. So the rails are interesting, right? Because they were the first really to buy into edge computing, right?
Yeah.
So it started with BNSF. BNSF, we did a presentation at BNSF, and they came to us afterwards and said, "Look, we really are interested in having you guys use your edge and platform technology to monitor all the railroad crossings in Texas, because there's legislation out there for the rails that in Texas and Illinois currently, um, the states have said you need to monitor these things remotely for functionality and so forth, right? So to make sure that they're operational. Really, for weather events, I know for Texas, it's like, hey, if there's a hurricane, we want to know what crossings are operational, what are not in an emergency, right? I
Yeah.
think Illinois is similar. So legislation came down, the rails needed to do this. And as the rails started researching the solutions to this, they were given package solutions from other vendors that were tied to hardware, right? We're hardware agnostic. And part of it was they didn't really like the options they were given in terms of price. And so when you're a big company like BNSF, they said, we don't like not having options. We're a bunch of engineers. You guys seem like you're really smart. Here's what we want to do. We want to do a pilot, and we'll ship you some equipment, and we want you to use your software to stream these key data points off of a railroad crossing. So they want to know battery level. They want to know the lights, the gates, make sure everything's working, so they can monitor all this remotely instead of having to roll a truck every week or every month. And so that's what we did. And within a few months, we got it configured to do all that. And it's really kind of the precursor to intelligent assets. We built that type of system. This is also challenging because the way we built our software, we can deploy it on premise. So the cloud, the rails weren't using any cloud. So it's like, well, you got to put it behind our firewall with all our security, and you've got to put it on these devices out in the field by the railroad crossing. So rails, fascinating business from a technology standpoint. So you have these little bungalows that house this equipment. So
That's also
at
one
the
of
end
the
of the day,
that's also one of the difficulties, right? That it has to be integratable at scale with stuff that is already in place, that is already there.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be brownfield. You've got to be able to put it on existing equipment. You've got to be able to integrate with existing enterprise software, ticketing systems, and enterprise asset management systems. You name it, right? And look at our background. Look where we came from. We came from doing big, ugly mainframe stuff, so it's in our DNA already,
Yeah.
right? So we had success hardening our product through these companies. Ream was the other one that they started working with us in 2018, and they're connecting up several 100,000 water heaters around the world, and we're their core system for streaming data from water heaters, so they can do all sorts of operational things.
One in my
They
home
can control.
myself, Eric,
Yeah,
actually. So
yeah.
yeah.
So those are interesting use cases. We work with Boeing to track equipment across 16 different airports to aircraft maintenance. We work with water companies. We got a water company in Napa that has remote reverse osmosis systems for cleansing water that go to the
Right.
wineries, and for remote locations that do not have access to California water. So there's again, state compliance on the cleanliness of that water for
Yeah.
drinking, right? So now, instead of having to drive a truck up these mountainous areas where they have to go check it, they now have remote dashboard to see how all of their equipment is operating and if there's any problems. What that also does is that builds their report for them that they send to the state, so they don't have to go do it themselves if they have all the data. And on and on and on. You could think of a myriad of use cases, right, on where we're going with this. Google themselves is using ClearBlade to monitor all of their buildings,
Yeah.
all of their water usage and all of their energy usage. And they've rolled it out to, I think now it's like over 100 buildings, and they plan to go to all 700 plus.
So
So
utilities, health and safety at scale, huge use cases, right? Okay.
huge.
So Eric, we've passed the 1.5 hour mark already, because
Oh my gosh.
that's how it goes when you're having fun. So I've been enjoying. I mean, you're a great storyteller. I knew this
Thank you.
already, so I can listen to this for a long time. But I have two questions for you. I have two
Okay.
questions for you to wrap this one up. So first and foremost, when it comes to ClearBlade, what would be your dream? What would be the dream use case or the dream industry still to conquer, where you feel you can contribute a lot of value yeah, for the next 5 to 10
Yeah.
years. So that's question
We're,
one. And question two is,
okay.
what will the future look like for ClearBlade? What are your long-term plans? What is
Okay.
your high over strategy? Yeah, shoot.
Yeah. So Ben, we're working with a new customer now. These are some of our dream use cases where, look, we've got over a decade plus of mostly failure in IoT. And these big enterprise companies have built up a lot of IP, and they're struggling with that IP, keeping up with the business. And what our ideal customers are the ones that know the pain of trying to do this at scale, that don't understand that there's a way out, right? You don't have to throw everything away that you've done, your dashboards, your mobile apps, all of your interconnections, but replace the guts with a consistent footprint of software that handles all this. So we're currently doing a big new project out with a customer in Atlanta. They've got 5 different systems that deal with water infrastructure, right? So pressure loggers and water meters and leak detection and fire hydrants and all this stuff. And projects like that are wonderful for us because they already have millions of devices in the field, but they're struggling to keep up. So when we can go in a few months, replace that infrastructure and get them running on a consistent platform that we monitor and maintain, and they can focus on the business. That's a perfect type of customer for us. It's very similar to Ream, very similar to when I say manufacturing, we're typically are on the manufacturing floor. We're on the products that they manufacture. So
Yeah, yeah.
industrial products, right? And so to me, where ClearBlade goes is right now, the world is still doing it the old school way, right? And my vision for this company and the team's vision is to be the number one IoT provider in the world with a consistent software package that's running in all sorts of regions. We're already run in Asia and Europe and North America today. We have customers in India. We've got all these customers that are upgrading to our enterprise platform from the Google stream of business, right?
Yep.
The other part of it is partnering with someone like Google has been really valuable to us. Even though we're cloud agnostic, when it comes to go to market, Google now does not have a competing product. And so whenever they want to stream machine data into their AI tooling and into their cloud, they come and bring us involved, get us involved, which is fabulous, which a company the size of Google to start to recognize, hey, look, we need this service. We weren't successful at managing a low level service, but these guys know how to do it. And so the more that we go to market with Google, the bigger we'll get. And, you know, we're always engineering, we're always improving, but man, are we ahead of the game? And
Seems like it, and
now, yeah,
yeah, that's what
and
I've
now we're
also.
getting all the right requirements from the customers, right? Before we were guessing, this is what the market needs. Now the market's telling us we need this, 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 and this. And so we quickly turn around product features and fire them out there.
Yeah, you guys are firing on all cylinders for sure. I've been lucky enough to witness that from up close, and the market just needed time to catch up, I guess, and now the world is yours to grasp. And it was super fun, especially doing the brand sprint with you guys, doing the value proposition canvas, figuring out the right way to talk to the market now that they seem to be
Yes.
ready for your approach, and that was
Well,
really fun. And and looking forward to doing more of that in the future. Eric, we're
yeah.
gonna wrap this one up. So you can
All right,
continue with
man.
your day and I can go home to my family because we're in
Yes.
very,
Yeah.
very, very different time zones. But I
Time
really,
zones. Exactly.
yeah, I really appreciate you doing this. I think it was a great conversation. And Yeah, and just inspiring story. And for me, the biggest takeaway is action produces information because you're that type of person. And I think this goes for a lot of people who are somewhat reluctant to just take a chance every now and then. And I think that's exactly how you lived your life and how you got through all these adventures and made money and lost money and had success and
You
met the love
nailed
of
it.
your life just by doing stuff. And that is what's
Yeah.
most inspiring about you as a person and getting to know you a little bit. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah. And
And
I'll add, look, that's the thing that stops most people. And it's fear and all of the barriers. that you know are going to be in your way. And the older you get, the more that you understand the barriers. So what I try to do is go back to that 27-year-old that I was
Yeah.
when I did the first one. And whenever I start to overthink, just say, look, what did you do then? You knew nothing then. And you jumped off a cliff and it worked out.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to move forward. Now you do that with a team and balance, but I think that the idea of being naive is why young people are so much more adept at this. And so I try to put myself in that 27-year-old brain. Sometimes it gets me in trouble, but most times it leads to good things.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice to live by. So go get it, everybody. And see you next time. Thanks, Eric. Speak soon.
Thanks, Ian. You're
All right.
fantastic.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.